90 years old, barren her entire life. And then God makes a promise that sounds like mockery. A son, next year, at her age. She laughs, not because she doubts God exists, but because the promise seems too good, too impossible, too late. But what if I told you that her laughter, her decades of waiting, her mistakes along the way, all of it was woven into a divine plan that would demonstrate God's faithfulness throughout the generations? This is not just a story about an old woman who had a baby. This is the story of Sarah, the woman who learned that God's timing is not our timing, and that nothing is too difficult for the Lord. Her name means Mistress of Nations. But for most of her life, she felt like anything but a ruling lady. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the biblical stories that reveal the character of God and strengthen your faith. Sarah was born in the ancient city of Ur of the Chaldeans, one of the most advanced cities of the ancient world. Ur was not some primitive settlement. It was a thriving metropolis with ziggurats reaching toward the heavens, bustling markets filled with traders from distant lands, and sophisticated systems of writing and commerce. The Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 11, verse 29, that her original name was Sarai, and she became the wife of Abram, who would later be known as Abraham. We are also told that Abram and Sarai were actually half-siblings, sharing the same father, but different mothers, which was not uncommon in that culture and that time period. But there was something that marked Sarah's life from the very beginning, something that in her culture was considered a curse, a sign of divine displeasure. Genesis 11 verse 30 states it plainly with 5 simple words. Now Sarai was barren. She had no child. Those words carried the weight of a lifetime of pain. In the ancient Near East, a woman's value was largely measured by her ability to produce heirs, especially sons. Barrenness was not just a personal sorrow, but a social shame, a daily reminder of perceived failure. Consider what Sarah's life in Ur might have looked like. Perhaps she woke each morning hoping this month would be different. She likely watched other women her age carry their babies, celebrate their sons, and secure their futures through motherhood. Month after month, year after year, her womb remained closed. The whispers behind her back, the pitying looks, the unspoken questions must have been constant companions. Why has God denied her? What has she done to deserve this? In a society where a woman's primary purpose was seen as bearing children, especially male heirs, Sarah lived with a constant sense of inadequacy that no achievement or wealth could erase. Every family gathering likely reminded her of what she lacked. Every celebration of a birth in the community probably reopened the wound. The years were passing, and with each passing year, hope grew dimmer. Sarah was not just barren. She was becoming older, and the likelihood of ever having a child seemed to vanish a little more with each sunset. Then one day, everything in Sarah's world was turned upside down. God spoke to her husband Abram with a command that seemed absurd. Genesis 12 verse 1 records, "The Lord had said to Abram, 'Go from your country, your people, and your father's household, to the land I will show you.'" Go where? To a land I will show you. No map, no clear destination, just go. Leave everything you know and follow me into uncertainty. And here is where it gets interesting. God made Abram a promise that seemed to mock their childless reality. Genesis 12 verses 2 and 3. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." A great nation, from a man who had no children, from a wife who could not conceive. The promise must have seemed like a cruel joke to Sarah. A great nation requires descendants. Descendants require children. Children require a womb that works. And Sarah's did not. Yet Abram believed God's word, and Sarah chose to follow her husband into the unknown. She left everything she knew. It's reasonable to assume she said goodbye to family members she would never see again. She left the comfortable home she had known, the streets she had walked, the marketplace where she had shopped. She traded the security and sophistication of Ur for a tent in the wilderness, exchanging civilization for the nomadic life. The Bible does not record Sarah's thoughts during this journey, but we can imagine the questions that must have filled her mind as she traveled with the caravan, as she set up camp in unfamiliar places, as she lay awake at night under stars. How can God make Abram into a great nation when I cannot give him even one child? Is this promise real, or are we following a dream into the desert? She had been barren in Ur. She remained barren in Haran, where they stayed for a time. She was still barren as they journeyed into Canaan. The change of location did not change her condition. The promise of a great nation seemed further from reality with each passing year. Yet God had spoken, and they continued to believe. Their journey took them through Canaan, the land God promised to show Abram. But Canaan was experiencing a severe famine. So Abram decided to go down to Egypt, where food was more plentiful. Genesis 12 verse 10 tells us, "Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe." As they approached Egypt, something happened that reveals both Abram's fear and Sarah's remarkable beauty. The Bible doesn't specify her exact age at this point, but she was certainly not young. Genesis 12 verses 11 through 13 record Abram's words as he was about to enter Egypt. He said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." This was not faith. This was fear. Abram asked Sarah to lie, to present herself as his sister rather than his wife. Technically, she was his half-sister. But this was still a deceptive half-truth meant to protect Abram at Sarah's expense. The Bible does not tell us how Sarah felt about this request, but she agreed. What choice did she have in that patriarchal culture? When they entered Egypt, Sarah's beauty did indeed catch attention. Genesis 12 verse 15 says, "And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace." Sarah was taken into Pharaoh's household, likely preparing to become one of his wives. Can you imagine what she must have felt? Separated from her husband, surrounded by strangers, in a foreign palace. But God protected what was his. Genesis 12 verse 17 states, "But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife, Sarai. Pharaoh discovered the truth and confronted Abram, then sent them away with all their possessions." Years passed, 10 years to be exact. Genesis 16 verse 3 tells us that Sarah gave Hagar to Abram after they had been living in Canaan for 10 years. A full decade in the Promised Land, and still no child. Sarah and Abram had returned to Canaan from Egypt and prospered with flocks and herds and silver and gold. But the promise of descendants remained unfulfilled. Sarah was now well past the normal age of childbearing. In the ancient world, women typically gave birth at a young age. Sarah was likely approaching 70 years old at this point. Month after month brought the same disappointment. The silence of God on this matter must have been deafening. She had followed Abram out of Ur. She had trusted the promise. She had waited year after year, and nothing had changed. The barrenness that had marked her life in Ur still marked her life in Canaan. Then Sarah made a decision that would have consequences echoing through generations to this day. Consequences we still see in the Middle East thousands of years later. Genesis 16 verse 1 tells us, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar." Hagar was likely acquired during their time in Egypt, when Pharaoh had given gifts to Abram. In ancient Near Eastern culture, it was accepted practice for a barren wife to give her slave to her husband to produce an heir on her behalf. The child would legally belong to the wife. This was not considered adultery or immorality in that culture, but a recognized solution to the problem of barrenness. Sarah, perhaps tired of waiting, perhaps feeling the crushing weight of her apparent failure, perhaps genuinely trying to help fulfill God's promise in the only way she could see possible, decided to take matters into her own hands. Genesis 16 verse 2 records, "So she said to Abram, 'The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her.' Abram agreed to what Sarai said. Notice Sarah's words, 'The Lord has kept me from having children.' She recognized that her barrenness was somehow under God's control, yet she decided to circumvent it through Hagar and the customs of her culture. This was a mistake, though entirely understandable from a human perspective. Sarah was trying to force God's promise to come true through her own efforts. She could not see how God could give her a child at her age. So she devised what seemed like a practical solution. The plan seemed logical, even reasonable by the standards of her time. Hagar would bear a son. Sarah would raise him as her own. The promise would be fulfilled. But God's ways are not our ways, and human solutions to divine promises rarely end well. Hagar became pregnant, and immediately the household dynamics shifted. Genesis 16 verse 4 says, "He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress." The Hebrew word translated as despise means to look down upon someone with contempt. Hagar, who had been a slave with no status, suddenly carried something Sarah could never have. The pregnancy gave her power. Every glance, every gesture reminded Sarah of her own barrenness. The pregnancy that was supposed to solve the problem created a much bigger one. The household that had functioned with clear hierarchies now had tension and conflict at its core. Sarah's pain turned into resentment and hostility. Genesis 16 verse 5 records her words to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." Notice that Sarah, who had suggested this entire arrangement, who had given Hagar to Abram, now blamed Abram for the consequences. Abram, perhaps recognizing his own failure in agreeing to Sarah's plan, perhaps simply wanting peace in his household, abdicated responsibility. Genesis 16 verse 6, Abram said, "Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The Bible does not tell us exactly what this mistreatment entailed, but it was severe enough that Hagar, even pregnant, chose the dangerous desert over remaining in Sarah's household. Think about that. Hagar was carrying Abram's child, yet the situation had become so unbearable that she risked death in the wilderness. An angel found Hagar in the desert and told her to return and submit to Sarah, also giving her a prophecy about her son. Hagar returned, and in time gave birth to Ishmael when Abram was 86 years old. The Bible does not record Sarah's feelings as she watched another woman nurse the child she had hoped would be the fulfillment of the promise. We can only imagine the complex emotions of relief mixed with bitterness, of hope mixed with grief. 13 more years passed in relative silence from God. Abram was now 99 years old. Sarah was 89. Any hope of natural childbearing had long since vanished into impossibility. Then God appeared to Abram again with a message that would change everything and clarify the promise once and for all. Genesis 17, verse 1. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless." God made a covenant with Abram, and as part of this covenant, he changed their names as a prophetic declaration of what he would do. Genesis 17, verse 5. "No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations." And in verse 15, God also said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah." Sarai, which likely meant my lady, became Sarah, which means Lady of Nations or Princess. God was giving her a new identity, declaring over her who he would make her to be. Then came the specific promise that left no room for confusion. Genesis 17, verse 16. "I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her." Not through Hagar, not through Ishmael, through Sarah. Abraham's response is recorded in the next verse, and it shows that even the man of faith struggled to believe this particular promise. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, "Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? Even Abraham, the man who had believed God enough to leave everything and follow him into the unknown, found this promise hard to accept. He even suggested that Ishmael could be the heir, perhaps trying to make things easier for God. But God was clear and specific. Genesis 17, verse 19, God said, "Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." The promise was unmistakable. Not Ishmael, Isaac, through Sarah. The covenant line would continue through the son of promise, not the son of human effort. Time moved forward to the events of Genesis 18, one of the most remarkable and intimate encounters in Sarah's story. By this point, Sarah was 89 years old. Abraham was 99, and any realistic hope of natural conception had been gone for decades. The biological impossibility of having a child at their ages was beyond question. Genesis 18, verse 1. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. It was midday, the hottest part of the day when most people rested. 3 visitors appeared, and Abraham, showing the extraordinary hospitality that characterized his culture, hurried to prepare a meal for them. Genesis 18, verse 6 tells us, "So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. 'Quick,' he said, 'get 3 seahs of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread.' 3 seahs of flour is approximately 20 quarts, enough to make bread for a feast, not just a simple meal." Abraham was treating these visitors as honored guests. He also selected a choice, tender calf from his herd, and had it prepared. This was no ordinary meal, but a banquet. Sarah was inside the tent, kneading the flour, preparing the bread, working in the heat. Perhaps she wondered who these visitors were and why Abraham was treating them with such honor. She could hear the conversation outside, the voices of the strangers speaking with her husband. Then one of them spoke words that must have made her hands stop mid-knead. Genesis 18, verse 9. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. The visitor knew her name, not Sarai, her old name, but Sarah, the new name God had given her. "There in the tent," Abraham said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. A son next year." For Sarah, for the woman who had been barren her entire life, the woman who was now 89 years old and long past menopause. A son next year. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. She heard every word. Genesis 18 verse 11. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Sarah laughed, not out loud, not mockingly to the visitor's face, but to herself, inside the tent where no one could see her expression. The Hebrew word suggests a laugh of incredulity, of disbelief, perhaps even with a touch of bitterness. How could this possibly happen? The biological clock had not just stopped, but had been dismantled decades ago. The very idea seemed absurd. Will I now have this pleasure? The word pleasure here can refer to the joy of intimacy, the delight of conception, the happiness of holding a child. All of it seemed impossible, laughably impossible. But here is the remarkable thing. The visitor heard her silent laugh, the laugh she thought was private, hidden, safe from judgment. Genesis 18 verse 13, Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?'" The Lord knew. He knew her thoughts. He knew her doubt. He knew the laugh that she had tried to keep to herself. And then came the question that is the heart of Sarah's story. The question that echoes through every generation that reads this account. Verse 14, "Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Is anything too hard for the Lord? That question was not just for Sarah. It was for everyone who has ever faced an impossible situation, everyone who has ever doubted that God could do what He promised, everyone who has ever laughed at divine promises because they seemed too good to be true. Sarah became frightened when she realized the visitor had heard her private thoughts. Genesis 18 verse 15. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." God called out her disbelief, her doubt, her fear. Yet even in her doubt, God's promise stood firm. The child would come. Not because Sarah believed perfectly, but because God keeps His word. In Genesis 21, the promise that had been repeated for 25 years finally came to pass, exactly as God had said. Genesis 21 verse 1. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as He had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what He had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him, 100 years old. That is how old Abraham was when Isaac was born. Sarah was 90, decades past menopause, decades past any medical possibility. Yet the child came, exactly as God had said, at the appointed time. Abraham named him Isaac, which means he laughs. Genesis 21 verse 6 records Sarah's words, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." The laugh of doubt had become a laugh of joy. The woman who had waited so long, who had made mistakes trying to help God, who had doubted the promise, now held the impossible child in her arms. She continued in verse 7, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." The impossible had become reality. The promise kept. The laughter of joy replaced the laughter of disbelief. But Sarah's story was not finished yet. The presence of Ishmael, now a teenager, created tension in the household that could not be ignored. Genesis 21 verse 9. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. The Bible does not give us full details of what this mocking entailed, but it was serious enough that Sarah took decisive action. Genesis 21 verse 10. She said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." This demand distressed Abraham greatly, because Ishmael was his son too, his firstborn, the boy he had raised for 14 years before Isaac was born. But God spoke to Abraham in verse 12, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." God confirmed that the covenant line would continue through Isaac, not Ishmael. The decision was made. Hagar and Ishmael were sent away with provisions, and God protected them in the desert, later making Ishmael into a great nation as he had promised. Two sons of Abraham, two different destinies. One covenant child born according to God's promise and timing, one born according to human effort and cultural custom. Sarah lived to see Isaac grow into a man. Genesis 23 verse 1 tells us, Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She had 37 years with her miracle son. 37 years to see the fulfillment of the promise, to watch the child who should not have existed grow into a man, to know that God had kept his word. When Sarah died, Abraham mourned for her deeply and bought the cave of Machpelah as a burial place. Genesis 23 verse 19. Afterward, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which is at Hebron in the land of Canaan. She was the first person to be buried in the land God had promised to Abraham's descendants. Even in death, Sarah was connected to the promise. The New Testament honors Sarah's faith in remarkable ways. Hebrews 11 verse 11. And by faith even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Despite her initial laughter, despite her mistakes with Hagar, despite her doubts, Sarah ultimately believed. God counted her among the heroes of faith listed in Hebrews 11. 1 Peter 3 verses 5 and 6 also mentions her. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Sarah's life became a model of faith for generations to come, not because she was perfect, but because she ultimately trusted God's faithfulness. What can we learn from Sarah's story? First, waiting on God's timing is one of the hardest tests of faith. Sarah waited 25 years from promise to fulfillment. God's delays are not denials. He is working even when we cannot see it. Second, trying to help God fulfill his promises in our own strength leads to unintended complications. Sarah's decision to give Hagar to Abraham was culturally acceptable, but not God's way. God does not need our shortcuts. His promises will come to pass in his time. Third, God works through imperfect people who make real mistakes. Sarah lied, laughed in disbelief, mistreated Hagar, and blamed Abraham. Yet God still worked through her. He requires faith, not perfection. Fourth, nothing is too difficult for the Lord. A 90-year-old woman having a baby is medically impossible. Yet with God, the impossible becomes reality. Fifth, God keeps his word without exception. Every promise God made to Sarah came true, even if it took longer than expected. Sarah's story reminds us that our struggles with faith and moments of doubt do not disqualify us from God's purposes. God worked through Sarah because He is faithful. Her laughter of doubt became laughter of joy. Her barrenness became fruitfulness. The child born to a 90-year-old woman became the father of Jacob, who became Israel, from whose line came David and ultimately Jesus Christ. Through Sarah's impossible son came the Messiah who would bless all nations, exactly as God promised. When Sarah held Isaac in her arms, every year of waiting suddenly made sense. Today, you might be in your own season of waiting. Perhaps you have been believing God for something that seems impossible. Perhaps you have made mistakes trying to force answers in your own timing. Perhaps you have even laughed at the promises of God because they seem too good to be true or too late to happen. Sarah's story speaks to you across the millennia. God specializes in impossible situations. He delights in doing what cannot be done so that His glory is revealed and His faithfulness is demonstrated. The same God who gave a child to a 90-year-old woman is the same God who loves you today. Is anything too hard for the Lord? That question was asked to Sarah thousands of years ago. That question is being asked to you right now, in your situation, in your impossibility. Whatever you are facing, whatever seems impossible in your life, remember Sarah. Remember that God's timing is not our timing. Remember that His promises are yes and amen. Remember that He is faithful even when we doubt. Remember that nothing, absolutely nothing, is too difficult for Him. Sarah waited for the promise to be fulfilled for 25 years, and the promise came exactly as God had said. Your waiting will not be in vain. God is working even now, even when you cannot see it, even when it seems too late. Trust Him. Like Sarah, you may laugh in disbelief now, but God is writing a story that will end with laughter of joy. The impossible will become possible. The promise will be fulfilled. Because nothing is too hard for the Lord. If this story has encouraged your heart, if Sarah's journey has spoken to your own season of waiting, I want to ask you to do something. First, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss these biblical stories that strengthen faith. Second, give this video a thumbs up if it blessed you. It helps us reach more people who need to hear that God keeps His promises. Third, leave a comment below telling us what part of Sarah's story resonated most with you. Are you in a season of waiting? Have you tried to help God fulfill His promises in your own way? Share your thoughts. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that God's timing is perfect and He can do the impossible. And remember, the same God who was faithful to Sarah is faithful to you. He who promised is faithful. God bless you.